Tell me a little bit about the study.
Okay, so this is a 5-year longitudinal study that we began in 2011-2012. It's in collaboration between our center, the Brain and Creativity Institute, the Los Angeles Philharmonic and their Youth Orchestra program, and Heart of Los Angeles, OLA. The goal of this study was to understand, what does music training do for children? How does it help with their academic achievement, their cognitive and brain development, and also their social and emotional development? So we selected a group of children after they have enrolled into the music program, but before they had any training. We also selected control groups because we know that every child changes, every child gets better with their language and cognitive skills. So we have 2 control groups, one active control group of children who have signed up to an athletic program, whether that was soccer or swimming. And then we also have a 3rd control group of children who were not doing anything specific, nor music, nor sports. They took classes here and there, but it was not a systematic training. We tested all of the groups at the onset before they had any training and established a baseline that there were no systematic differences between these 3 groups. From there, we have been following them since 2012. Every child comes to our center once a year for a couple of days sometimes because the tests are long and we want to make sure they don't get tired. And we basically measure their psychological profile, looking at their language development, IQ, cognitive abilities like attention, memory, executive function. We look at their social development such as empathy, compassion, how they relate with their friends. And these are done either through questionnaires or through tasks that we do with them. We also look at their brain development itself using magnetic resonance imaging or MRI. We basically take a picture of their brain, the structure of the brain, how the structures of the brain are connected with each other, and also how does the brain function when we give them a task. And then finally, we use electroencephalography or EEG, putting electrodes on the scalp to look at the electrical activity of the brain while they're doing a task. And throughout these years, we basically look at group differences. How did the music group perform differently from the sports group and the control group? And over the years, we have published results that have shown what are the traits that we have seen improved as a result of music training.
What did you find?
Over the years, things started to change slowly. The very first system of the brain that we observed changes in was the auditory system. Basically, this is the system that takes auditory or sound information from the ear to the auditory cortex, the part of the brain that processes sound information. So after 2 years of training, we observed that children who have had music training compared to the other groups are better with auditory skills, such as discrimination of pitch or discrimination of rhythm, or following a beat with another person. And also we saw improvement in the development of the auditory pathway faster in children who have had music training compared to the control groups. Biologically, this auditory pathway in the children who have had music training looked more similar to an adult, even though their age matched. So this was very encouraging, expected, because this is a system that responds to the stimulus that they're practicing, music. Further from that, we also were interested to see what else can change. Does these changes extend to other types of behavior? I want to emphasize that this auditory pathway, even though it's engaged in music processing, it obviously involves in everything else that we do with sound, whether it's reading, language, communication. So looking at other skills, one of the things we have seen is improvement of the brain systems that control cognitive function. So there is a set of skills that we refer to as executive function skills. They basically are in control of working memory, inhibition or impulse control, and the task switching, ability to switch between tasks. So we give children a task to do inside the MRI scanner. This task involves inhibition or impulse control, stopping yourself from something doing immediately in favor of something else later. And we saw that children who have had music training had stronger brain activation in the frontal regions of the brain. These are the areas that are responsible for decision making, and that are not necessarily directly related to music. You don't go learn decision making when you practice music, but it seems to be a byproduct or a far transfer effect of music training that we observe in these children compared to the control group. that they had stronger activation. We also saw changes in the biology of the cortical matter of the auditory cortices in the brain. So we saw that children who have had music training again seem to have neuroplastic changes in the temporal lobe that we don't observe in the other two groups. And further, we saw more communication between the left and the right side of the brain. So there is a kind of a highway that passes information. It's called the corpus callosum that connects the left and the right side of the brain. And we saw more robust connectivity in the anterior portion, in the motor portion and sensory portion of the corpus callosum in children who have had music training compared to the control groups. Overall, it seems that changes that we have observed are not really changes that were directly related to music, such as pitch and rhythm discrimination, but also changes in other domains, such as cognitive skills and the brain networks that are responsible for these cognitive processing, and also the connectivity between the two sides of the brain that seem to have enhanced as a result of music training compared to the other groups.
And then at year 5, are you noticing just more striking differences?
Yeah, so at year 5, as we are currently analyzing and publishing data from the last year, is that some of those changes continue to go on. So for example, this connectivity between the left and the right side of the brain seem to even enhance from year 3. There are other changes that we see. For example, one of the things that we have published is the ability of children who have had music training in empathic response and social behavior seems to be connected to their ability to synchronize with another person when they play drums, and we don't see that in other groups. So other changes that are, again, a little bit more one step away from necessarily those musical skills that you learn. So I mean, if you play music, you inhibit yourself, you have to listen to others. If you play with a group, you have to pay attention to the conductor, you have to follow. So it seems that all of those things that you do in order to produce music also can bring awareness and strength to these other skills that are really important in life, like decision making or planning for future.
So the musically trained kids did better than both of the other groups? Were both of the other groups kind of even?
The sports group, in some tasks, did as well as the music group. So a lot of these, for example, cognitive tasks or social tasks, the sports group do as well. The more striking differences were between children who have had music training versus the ones who did not have anything. And that's probably because related to when you do something fun and social and you're being paid attention to and interactive, some of these social changes come about. So the goal of the study was not really to say music is better than sports. I think for a whole child development, both of these aspects are important. There are certain things, like for example, the connectivity between the left and the right side of the brain that we see specifically in music children and not in the sports as much.
Why do you think that it's working that way?
So, for example, specifically with that connectivity between the left and the right side on the motor and on the sensory regions, imagine playing violin. You have to pay attention to both of your hands. Both hemispheres of your brain are engaged in making this happen. You have to kind of control the sound by making fine motor adjustment on the board, but also you have to be careful of the bow, of how fast you're moving it. So it does seem that this activation of both sides at the same time drives that connectivity that we see later in the future. And that's also been shown when other researchers have looked at adult musicians. We seem to see the same effect.
Whether they learned it as an adult or a child?
Usually as a child. So a lot of these improved in other skills are related to how early you started playing music and how long you have played music.
What do you hope that this study and the results achieve for kids?
So we basically, one of the motivations of doing this study was the observation that music education seems to get dropped out of the school curriculum very early on. So when we are faced with budget cuts and administrators have to make decisions, music and art seem to be the very first one to go. And we wanted to show that music is as important as math and science. It's not there to replace them, but it should be given equal weight to other disciplines, because not only it's fun and brings children together and teaches them social skills, but it does seem to be actually important toward their brain and cognitive development. And also there's like executive function skills that are really like impulse control is something we really like to teach children. So if they can learn it through a fun mechanism and actually have pride and interest in it, all better. So we are hoping that we can reach policymakers and decision makers and share the results with them in hopes that they put more resources and efforts for the music program. The program that we are currently studying is an after-school music program, but it's after-school music program that is offered to low socioeconomic status neighborhoods for free, and these children get such a unique opportunity to play music. So if that can be replicated in many settings and even bring to the school curriculum, like everyday school, that's probably what we're hoping that this study can contribute to.
Have you gotten any kind of feedback yet from schools, parents, policymakers?
Well, we've got quite feedback from the parents of like how important they've seen that this music training has been for their children, how they're emotionally better communicators, they connect with their families better. Also, they've brought music back to their parents' house. Some of these parents are very busy and they don't really have time, and the child brings and plays violin, and there's that sense of community and family feeling that comes in. We've been distributing the results with a lot of music educators and basically showing that what they do is very important, even though sometimes are not given as much importance, and then just giving talks at conferences and anywhere that we can, also kind of publishing as a kind of the standard procedure of scientific publication, doing peer-reviewed publication and sharing those publications with policymakers to see if any change can come about.
With these results, what's your message to parents?
Yes. Well, I think music learning should be a fun experience. That's kind of what I always share with parents, that what you want for a child is to play something and have fun with it and be proud of it. Something that they can show off to their family, to their friends. But yeah, if they can pick up an instrument, if they can enroll in Mommy and Me classes as early as possible, if they can find these youth orchestras in their communities, there are many, many youth orchestras across the country that children can take part in. And just that exposure from the beginning sometimes brings a lot of joy to a child, and then they can pick it up from there. Sometimes they enroll in piano lesson and they don't like it, but maybe if they play something that they enjoy and the music theme of a movie that they heard, if they like to play Frozen and sing along with it, it doesn't need to be formal conservatory training at age 5 or 6. It just, if they have the exposure and fun, that's probably all we need to do to get them started. And then once they connect emotionally and their techniques get better, obviously we'll see these changes come about.
So what was the training? What did the kids do? Come in once a week, a couple times a week?
This training is based on the El Sistema program. That is a method that was developed in Venezuela. Los Angeles Philharmonic music director Gustavo Dudamel grew up with this method, and when he moved to Los Angeles, he had the idea of bringing the same method to communities of Los Angeles. It's actually a pretty intense program. They go every day. 2 hours after school. They're all given free instruments and free music training. The 2 hours, some of it is spent helping them with their homework and getting them to set up, but then the rest of it is all group training. So this emphasis on group and ensemble is there from the very beginning. They all play string instruments to begin with, but the message is that we're all playing together, because the goal of the program is not to create musicians per se, is to create citizens who appreciate music and who appreciate the value of art in their life. So if they become doctors, engineers, lawyers, filmmakers later in future, they have this connection and in a relationship with music. So it's all about, we have to play together for the orchestra, this unit, to sound well.
Are they still going 2 hours a day every day?
They go. And now I think the program is changed to like 4 days a week. So they go 3 days and the weekend. They have sectional training, so they help them with their technique, and then they do the whole ensemble training together as a full orchestra. So the overall program is called YOLA, Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles, and they have started with like one site, and now they have up to like 4 sites in the LA area, and bringing this music training to more and more children.
How many kids are part of the study?
Part of this study, in the music group, 25 children. We also have 25 in the sports group and 25 in the control group.
That's asking a lot of a 6-year-old, 2 hours a day, every day.
Yes, but it's also when I remember when I was talking to them first at the beginning, like, why do you go to music class? It was not that I go and play music. It was I want to go to be with my friends, and it's a sense of a community that this program creates for them. That there's a lot of like a place that I belong to, and sometimes in the communities that this program is done, it's more underprivileged communities. So this place also feels safe. It's a place to be away from dangers on the street. So it also brings that sense of stability and safety for them.
What else haven't I asked you about the program that you would like to make sure is included in the story?
Following longitudinally children has been a privilege for us to know these kids since they were 6 years old. They kind of establishing this relationship with them, and we're very grateful that they participated, and we hope that like we are doing a larger study beginning next month with very similar program, but just really is to provide as much as scientific evidence on the importance and the weight of this kind of art form that's been with us through our evolution. We play music at funerals and marriages and weddings and marches, so it's doesn't seem to be very wise to just throw it out because budgets are short sometimes.
So the music it's the youth orchestra, right? Did it exist even before?
Yes, it existed before, and the requirement for the children to be in the music program did not be that they had to be in the research. The research part was voluntarily, but and the idea of participating is to see if we participate in this research, can they bring more awareness to our communities if they have positive findings. But the music program is still going on regardless of the research. We have a extension granted by the National Endowment of the Arts to continue this study for another 2 years, and which is exciting for us because now they're going from elementary school to middle school, where your social environment becomes more complex and you have to make decisions that are a little bit more important than choosing between the marshmallow here now or 10 minutes later. So we just want to know, for example, of some of these effects that we see, for example, this inhibition and impulse control that we've observed before, does it translate into decision making during these middle school years?